Hello and welcome to episode 5 of DNA of the Soul. Today we're covering Batman Arkham Asylum for Windows PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and the Nintendo Switch. I'm your host James, and I am Vengeance. Today I'm joined by my co-host Matt.
I am the Knight.
And Kai.
I am Batman.
Our longtime viewers might be wondering, where is Joe?
Punished Venom Joe.
He is not on today's episode. He had prior arrangements which he could not escape. So today's episode will be done in his absence, in memorial. So, Matt, would you like to give the disclaimer for the episode?
Yeah, so we are going to be spoiling Batman Arkham Asylum. If you've not played it, just go play it. It's a good game. That's it.
It's not an extremely long game, but it is very good for what it is. It puts a lot of content in that short runtime. So, Batman Arkham Asylum was developed by Rocksteady Games. It was published by Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment and Eidos. Originally, the rights to create the game were given to Eidos, and they then contracted Rocksteady to develop it for them. The game was released for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. It was later ported to Windows. Rocksteady Games had released a single title before working on Batman Arkham Asylum, and it was an FPS. So going from that to an action-adventure comic book hero game is quite the unexpected leap. The game was written by Paul Dini, who is very important in Batman circles. He worked on the cartoons. He's been all over the place. And it was based on Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, which introduced the character of Archimedes Arkham, as well as some other plot elements that would be used for the game. We will take a small tangent to discuss Serious House on Serious Earth, in that the original work was kind of altered by Dave McKean, who did all the artwork for it, and several elements of Grant Morrison's original script were not used for the final version. This has caused some controversy as far as the comic goes. However, one controversy that was not caused by Dave McKean was that one of the things Grant wanted to do for the Joker during this comic was that he would have introduced him to Batman wearing full drag, but the editors at DC told Grant Morrison no, and that they were worried that would change people's perceptions of how the Joker was seen previously in other incarnations, and were worried about it being associated with a real person.
Also, they were a little bit worried about it being a tie-in for the movie that was coming out shortly afterwards, which is another thing that they were like, we don't want to have him in drag then for that.
However, those original storyboards are very interesting to look through, and the comic itself and its development is one of the highlights of comic book creation. Strong recommend looking into it for any of our viewers out there who haven't heard of it before. The game was developed in Unreal Engine 3.
One of the fun little side things is that there originally was going to be a Mad Hatter level with a hedge maze, but it was removed in early development because they realized it really didn't fit the tone of the game, because they were going for a little bit of darker thing, and the Mad Hatter was a little too happy and go lucky for that.
And it seems like they had good judgment with that, because this game has held several world records for most critically acclaimed superhero game ever, which is really impressive, especially at the time. Superhero games were not seen as of such high quality as they are now, so it winning any award at all was great at the time. This would lead to later Arkham Asylum, City, and Night being ported to the Nintendo Switch last year, which they were not as well received as the ports have a myriad of technical issues, especially Arkham Knight, which is essentially running on the equivalent of an Xbox 360 hardware. So, and these games do have some impressive technologies. For instance, NVIDIA physics integration, which have unique fog effects and like paper effects. Like in the Arkham Asylum, if you run past like the papers on the ground, they would slowly lift up from the wind that Batman has behind him running. So, some pretty impressive technologies for the time.
To go through a quick plot synopsis of the game, you start the game by catching Joker as Batman and taking him to Arkham Asylum directly, because Batman just has a bad feeling about something about the Joker being too easily caught. This leads to the Joker eventually breaking out and taking control of the asylum and saying, the only way that I won't destroy these 5 bombs that are throughout the city now is if Batman comes in to the asylum and experiences the fun I have planned. You then go on to fight a myriad of Batman's villains, including Harley Quinn, Scarecrow, Bane, Croc, and of course the Joker himself. And the game is just a very gritty game, is a good way to describe it. It's very serious compared to a lot of things. Like, Batman straight up calls Joker an animal, which is not really a thing that's been done in like any of the cartoons or anything like that. And it's also nice that like Joker the entire time, people are not like, oh, it's just the Joker. They're like, no, it's the Joker. We are scared of what he's going to do. And it's totally consistent, which is very nice.
Yes, I believe Asylum had discussed discussions from the guards during gameplay. Isn't that right, Kai?
Yes, it did.
And through them, you hear them talk about how Arkham vs. Joker is and behaves and how he treats his men. And they treat him just as seriously as anyone else would. So now we're going to go into some of the features that made Arkham Asylum so special when it came out in 2009. One of the largest, although it has not aged nearly as well, was motion capture. So all the NPCs in the game had motion capture dialogue, and when you would find hostages or Arkham's guards, you would talk with them and the game would zoom in and discuss with them.
And for old like motion capture designs, it is a little bit funny to go back and look at because some of their faces you're just like, what face were you making when you were talking about this? Because it's just, and like I said, it's an older game. It's like one of the first games to use this, but like still, some of the faces are like, I'm concerned with this face. Another interesting thing about the game is that it very much uses the Metroidvania design of how you go through the levels of you get an item, it lets you get to a new area or go back to an old area and explore a new thing, go find an enemy, get a new item, so on and so forth. And it still, as it did back then, feels very nice and just helps the game flow very well.
By and large, this game was sold off of the tone and setting of Batman. Batman is a very famous character. He's one of the most famous superheroes ever made. He has no superpowers whatsoever, and they managed to kind of capture that feeling through the game's cinematography. One of the big highlights to me about the game is when you're fighting Bane, and to finish him off, you just call the Batmobile in. Like, Batman has no super powered way of fighting the threats that he goes up against in this game. He just has to use his own wits, body, and will to take these things down.
Another mechanic of this game that definitely owes its existence to Metal Gear Solid is its stealth combat. Throughout the game, Batman will enter rooms with armed guards that he can't take head on. To add to the point of Batman being simply a man, he has to use stealth and gadgets to take out these armed guards as opposed to just brute strength. So in these rooms with armed guards, Batman has many vantage points that he can utilize to survey his area. He also has detective vision, which allows him to see his enemies through walls, and he has various gadgets that allow him to take out his enemies easily, as well as being able to sneak up behind them and silently take them down.
So Batman Arkham Asylum also contains what might be called immersive sim elements. A lot of times you will enter a room filled with guards, and it is very largely up to you how you want to approach them. Which of Batman's gadgets do you want to use to take them down? Do you want to try using his explosive gel? Do you want to throw batarangs to stun them? Do you want to jump from gargoyle to gargoyle and pull them out and choke them? Do you want to memorize their patrol patterns? And those elements really came out of nowhere again for a title like this. This was not something that had been done with superhero games before, but I think would be brought up a lot more in that genre afterward.
It also just makes you feel like Batman. It's so nice that while you're playing the game, it's not like a lot of older superhero games like that, they tried to make you feel like the hero and they would just try to limit you in some way. But with Batman, you just get to be Batman. You get to use your brain just as much as Batman does and feel so smart when you're like, oh, I know that this enemy is going to be turning around at this point so I can take out this other enemy. And that's just a really hard thing to capture that they did very well. So another thing about this game, the collectathon element of it. There are 240 collectibles, I believe is the number, of various different recordings of inmates talking about, like one of the early ones that you find is Harley Quinn talking about her being hired before when she's Harleen Quinn, a normal psychiatrist who just wants to talk to the crazy inmates of Arkham. And also the various Riddler trophies, because while you don't really deal with him, he just, put some puzzles around. He's like, let Batman deal with this. This is fun. And it's just fun to, like, every now and then be like, oh, there's a puzzle here. I'm going to solve this. And then you go back and it breaks up the game just enough to be like, I'm not in constant combat. I'm in also thinking mode to be Batman, which, again, helps with feeling like Batman.
And they managed to do it in such a way where you feel like Batman would go out of his way to discover those things. The Amadeus Arkham recordings, I believe, eventually lead you to discovering the plot setup for Arkham City, and the Riddler trophies are being done by Batman so he can keep Riddler talking so he can eventually locate and capture him wherever he's radioing in from. The upgrade system in Batman Arkham Asylum, it is there. It is kind of unrefined in that it is just one long selectable list of items. However, that upgrade system idea would wind up being used in a ton of games afterward, for specifically action adventure games in particular. Around this time, the 360 library in particular was kind of lacking. a lot of good action games. They had all their FPSs. That's what was popular and big at the time. But Batman kind of managed to break the mold, and I think that's why it won so many awards, was in the way that it broke that mold for the system and what was expected out of it and available for it. The game also had an amazing voice cast. So Batman, Joker, Harley Quinn, all of their original voice actors from the animated series came back to do the voices for Batman Arkham Asylum, and Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy would continue to reprise those roles through the rest of the Arkham series.
This game had very little competition. Like you said, we were talking about, is that there was no really other superhero games. There was, I can think of Superman 64 as a Superman game, but that one, or a superhero game, but like you didn't have that feeling of being a hero like as well as these games did. So it also helped the games very much sell, being like, oh yes, I am Batman.
Just to emphasize the lack of competition, Superman 64 is considered one of the worst games ever made. So just for a little perspective there.
This game did not just break the mold for superhero games, it shattered it into pieces with how much it changed this scene. One of the things that really helped with that is that the guy writing it, Paul Dini, was such a veteran of these characters. The world of Arkham feels like it is a DC setting and universe.
Another revolutionary thing this game introduced was what is called free flow combat, which is a chain-oriented combat system which allows you to chain counters, strikes, and stuns to build up a multiplier. Once you build this up enough, you can eventually execute special attacks, like a special takedown or an attack where you throw your enemies. And in addition to this, you can also mix in different gadgets into your combos, allowing for such a complicated combat system that it's almost an art form that you can master. It's so well made, and many games would adopt this combat system in the future. Big examples being Insomniac Spider-Man games and the Shadow of Mordor series.
The best thing about that system to me was that you could execute on being Batman, and the game rewards you for how much like Batman you behave. It's great.
A little bit of a side tangent, because we're talking about combat. Batman never kills people, but he does snap people's necks. And
no, he just breaks everything else.
He does full on, like we said, take his Batmobile and slam Bane into a river. Now, he does get up and he has a teddy bear in the next game that he really wants. But still.
The most memorable thing to me about playing those games was the violence Batman inflicts on his enemies. He never kills, but that will not stop him from absolutely curb stomping goons, and there's no way they're all still alive after what he does.
Batman,
it's impossible.
Is brutal in this game.
Batman may not have killed him, but the injuries did lead to their death.
So another feature this game had was adaptive AI, kind of like the Metal Gear games we discussed earlier. If you take out certain enemies, then other enemies will notice that they were taken out. They will react to it. Sometimes you can even chain enemies, like if you're on a gargoyle statue, you can take out one enemy with a stealth takedown and then wait for one of the other guards to notice he's downed and then jump down and grab him too and take him out the exact same way, like a spider. It's amazing. However, for as powerful as Batman is, he's still immortal. He's still a human being. If somebody gets a bead on him with a rifle and just fires an entire clip into him, you're done.
The game did have several DLCs released. However, the best DLC, in my opinion, was exclusive to the PlayStation 3, and that was a Joker DLC, which allowed you to play as the Joker in both combat and Predator challenge modes. Predator being the name of the stealth sections. Joker has several gadgets he can use, including exploding chattering teeth and a gun. I bet you can guess how the gun works.
I have a guess. I think it might kill people.
Correct. Yeah, Joker's not like Batman. He doesn't care about the lethality of his gadgets, so it is kind of entertaining to see. Mark Hamill recorded many great voice lines while he's walloping on Arkham guards, so it's a great DLC. If you do have a way of playing it, I would definitely recommend it.
My favorite features are Joker's stealth takedowns, where he just, you'll have to look it up for yourself, I guess. And also when he gets knocked out, Batman's the one who walks over him and says, "It's over, Joker. You'll never do anything now."
Right, it pulls a reverse card on the many death screens in the game. If Batman dies throughout the game, a multitude of villains will approach him and either taunt him or give him some ominous line about how they've taken over the city, and it's a really cool way to motivate the player to keep going, and to reverse that and have Batman do one of those was interesting.
So another thing about this is that we talked about, it did win Game of the Year at least once. The fun part is the Game of the Year edition gives you 3D glasses and lets you play with 3D on, which is just wild to me. Like, I've never experienced this, but it seems like such a fun way to do it, just to be like, we'll go through again and have a little twist on it.
I just want to see a 3D Batarang. The game does contain boss fights, like most good games do, I would argue. And throughout the game, the way you approach the boss fights changes slightly based on who you're fighting. So enemies like Bane or Harley Quinn or Scarecrow, you use the game's integrated mechanics to fight them. You're completing a challenge where you can't be seen, or you're doing an extremely difficult stealth section against the Scarecrow hallucinations you're going up against, or you're just doing everything you can not to let Bane touch you while letting him ram into walls. However, for me, the biggest and most memorable takeaway from Arkham Asylum was the Killer Croc fight. It's scary. It's legitimately one of the most exciting and terrifying action boss fights I've ever done in my life.
You are in the sewers looking for a pollen to help cure one of Poison Ivy's, like, I don't remember exactly what they are that she's has out there. But either way, there's these pollens that you have to get from there, and you are slowly being hunted by Croc, and he will just straight up jump you and end you in an instant. And it is terrifying. It is such a good immersive experience.
Kai, remind me, doesn't the way the fight ends is that Batman lines his own glove with his explosive gel and just rams it into Croc's mouth?
That's how he beats Titan Joker. What he does to beat Croc is he lures him down a hallway and makes a giant explosive gel bat symbol and has him charge him and then blows it up and drops him down a hole. It is one of the most tense things in a video game ever. You just have this hulking beast charging at you and you just have to stand there, and it is horrific.
Also, I want to say this because Croc in this game is massive. He is not like, there's some Croc interpretations where he's not as big. The man is 3 times your size probably, and just wants nothing but to eat Batman.
He's a monster. I have very good memories of that final fight. The one that I don't have as good of memories of, and the one that's kind of infamous, is Titan Joker, because Joker goes a little bit too much into the Warner Brothers Acme direction when he takes the primary MacGuffin of the game, which is the Titan Serum, and injects it into himself, what he thinks is the complete version of it, to fight Batman. And there are no words to describe it. If you have not seen it, it's worth going into that fight blind just to have it revealed for the first time. Not pleasant to look at. Decent fight.
I do want to point out the one thing, which is interesting, that during that fight, before the fight starts, actually, Batman gets hit with it and has one cure, which is got from the Killer Croc situation. And Batman, of course, takes the cure for it. And Joker just goes, "Why did you do that? You have no chance of beating me now because you did that. What the heck are you thinking?" And I just loved that line because of how crazy Joker is to think, like, why did you just not take it? Why didn't you just wait until after the fight? I just love that.
To me, that is the differentiation between a Mark Hamill Joker and a lot of the comic book versions of him. The Clown Prince of Crime from the DC animated universe and Arkhamverse sees Batman more as a rival to overcome than anything else, and he believes that he understands him as his rival. Those little moments are all over the game. The back and forth between Conroy and Hamill is so much fun to watch, and I'm really glad they got them both for this game. One other thing I wanted to talk about was the getting away mechanics. I mentioned this during the Metal Gear episode, but having a system that rewards you for getting away safely, having an exit path if your plan does not work out, is a very good thing for the game's overall design. And I think Batman Arkham Asylum rewards you for that in spades, because when you enter into the Predator sections, you get to identify, okay, here's where I can sneak away, here is where I can duck and run or escape back up to where the gargoyles are so that I can get out of combat. Those situations are a lot easier to set up and observe, and I think really reflects the 10 years that happened between Metal Gear 1 and Arkham Asylum. Does anybody have anything else to add before we move into some of our discussion points?
I would just like to say the dialogue between Conroy and Hamill is an absolute treat to listen to, and although he has unfortunately passed away, I would recommend researching anytime Batman was voiced by Kevin Conroy, because it is an absolute pleasure. And yeah, it was really important to me that Conroy was Batman in the past. So look into it. It's a fantastic performance through and through. And rest in peace, Kevin Conroy.
Kevin Conroy was the Batman.
He really was. He even played him in live action once, if I remember correctly. However, one thing that I wanted to ask on a slightly lighter note, is Alfred the best chef in the DC universe?
I think so.
I have a counter argument. I think it might be Iris West. Because think how much food the Flash has
Ooh.
to eat. And think how boring basic meals would get.
That is a
You
good
have to be
point.
a really good chef to constantly make food for the Flash.
That's true, but on the counter argument, Alfred makes food that Bruce Wayne will eat.
That is true. It's a question of quantity and quality, because is Iris just making as many meals as she can so the Flash can just demolish them and go, or is she trying to give him variety and he's just consuming it so fast that it doesn't matter?
I feel like it's one of those things where, like, I mean, you'd get so bored of food after a while that I feel like it's not when he's like on the go. I feel like Iris is the best chef when the Flash is home for the night, and it's like, I'm gonna make you the best meal since you've been eating like 20 different meals today. I'm gonna make sure it's unique and interesting.
It's a toss-up for sure.
One of the highlights to me about Arkham Origins, the prequel game, is that from the very beginning of the game, Alfred is a major character and he is trying to convince Bruce to stop being Batman. And you can tell that their relationship is such that Alfred feels he can say anything or speak his mind to Bruce, and that Bruce will at the very least listen to him, if not respect his decision and follow through on it.
Bruce,
Is there
your
anything-
eating habits are so bad right now. Come on, here, have a real meal for once.
He does emphasize the importance of a Christmas dinner in that game, so
Doesn't he bring it up almost in every phone conversation? Sir, you need to get back for Christmas dinner. It's Christmas
it
Eve.
is-
Come on.
it is a very frequent point.
Does this make Arkham Origins a Christmas game?
It's 100% a Christmas game,
Yeah, I'd say it's a Christmas game.
just like how Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Don't you string up anarchy on a Christmas tree
No.
in that game?
There's this guy, there's a thug you interrogate who wears a Christmas hat, and you hang him from a Christmas tree by his feet.
See, those are another group of people that, if you don't not getting down in 30 minutes, Batman may not have killed him, but that guy's definitely not alive anymore.
And then the other thing I wanted to make sure we talked about before scoring is Suicide Squad kills the Justice League, the worst thing that's ever happened to
Yes.
DC Batman.
Yes.
No discussion needed. Yes.
Yeah, I'm about to say, it's just a yes. That game was looking so hype.
If that game were the subject of this podcast, I would be talking for, another 5 hours about just the multitude of ways Batman would have defeated them. And I don't even want to, I'm just frustrated now. Why did you bring this up? That game is a disgrace.
There you go. I felt like we needed to bring it up before we moved on. The scoring section for Batman Arkham Asylum is a little bit different from the previous games we've covered. Up until this point, we have gone for console and company makers and sellers. So Batman Arkham Asylum did not do that really, so it's going to have a lower overall score. However, the perspective of how that score reflects against other games will be more clear the more games that we review and research and discuss. So the first and lowest score it received was in the before category, because to be honest, superhero games were seen as kind of a joke of a genre before Arkham Asylum, and Rocksteady Studios had done a single game before this. It was a no-name studio. So, there was Batman on Sega Genesis, done by Sunsoft, which was considered not terrible, but again, that game came out almost 15 plus years before Asylum did. And then there's also Batman on the NES, which is not very great. I think I played it growing up, and it's just a platformer with some gadgets. So we do give their before section a single point for being a Batman game, and Batman again having enough pull on his own to move things off of shelves. It's just what he does. It's what even happened with Suicide Squad kills the Justice League. People wanted to know what happened in that game because it had Arkham vs. Batman in it. Well, I guess it doesn't have him in it anymore. It did, however, have a little bit of build up on how to make the game be how it was because of things like Metal Gear and its stealth combat, and the action elements themselves, where you can see some of those bones coming into their own on the PlayStation 3 on some of its no-name action titles. Not no-name, but not very well known. Let's say this was right after God of War found its footing, but before Devil May Cry took over. Now, it has earned a 5 in this category. It won Game of the Year on multiple platforms. Like Kai was saying earlier, it had the Guinness World Record for being the most critically acclaimed superhero game of all time. Batman Arkham Asylum kind of came out of nowhere and just dominated the market. Again, on the 360, it was one of the most well-polished action games you could play that was not a first-person shooter. It let you play as Batman. It rewarded smart, careful play, and the people that enjoy reading and experiencing Batman got to be and experience being Batman. Then, the then category, it earned a 4 in. Arkham City and Arkham Knight are both critically acclaimed masterpieces in their own right. Origins a little bit less so, and Warner Brothers themselves have been more involved in the Arkham games over the years. They've lost a couple of major pieces from the original equation that they had, but the game definitely has its mark felt in things like Shadow of Mordor and Spider-Man for PlayStation. Both of those took a lot of inspiration for gameplay mechanics or plot elements and cinematography from the original Arkham games. One thing I did want to note was that Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment obtained a majority stake in Rocksteady Games after Arkham Asylum released. This meant that they had a much more vested interest in Rocksteady as a studio, and Rocksteady themselves grew 50% as a company during the development of Batman Arkham Asylum. That's how good the game was looking to its stakeholders, and that's how much they wanted to invest in making it good. And we will give them credit for that. In the now section, Batman Arkham Asylum has earned a 2 in the now section. The reality is that the original game is a little bit overshadowed by City and Night. Both of them are open world games with a lot more exploration and mechanics to engage with, and Rocksteady Games themselves spent 7 years making another title that kind of spit all over the Arkham universe.
That's right. They spent 7 years on Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League. 7 years. Just let that sink into your brain.
I also just want to point out, Rocksteady Games, now known for their third-person stealth and action gameplay with a fantastic combat system. And what do they decide to develop? A live service looter shooter with microtransactions. Sure, that's what your fans want.
7 years. Oh, it's funny because it's sad.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Sony Interactive developed Spider-Man for PS4 and Spider-Man Miles Morales, which I would argue are the true successors in the modern day for Batman Arkham Asylum. So its influence is still felt, but people don't talk about this game every week or month in gaming discussions or compare modern titles that came out to Arkham Asylum itself. There are also other games that still use the detective mode mechanics. Several 3D games have had that function. So that brings us to our final score. Batman Arkham Asylum has earned 2 bonus stars, which is also the lowest we've had so far. But again, these are meant to be kind of overachievement or peripheral things that we just want to acknowledge for the games that we discuss. The first star that it earned was in creator support. We discussed the Joker DLC for PlayStation 3. Not only was the studio willing to continue developing DLC for Arkham Asylum that was pretty unobtrusive to the gameplay, but they wanted to support it enough that they created an entirely other playable character, as well as porting it to the Nintendo Switch last year, which is fairly incredible to me.
They also made the game work in 3D after the Game of the Year edition, which is unnecessary, but they still did it.
The Unreal Engine 3 could do some things that nobody would have expected, I think. The other star it earned was in personal taste. This is every member of our podcast here today has spent untold hours with the Arkham series. It's one of my favorites in gaming. I think our audience can understand a little more why Kai uses it as his avatar. The Arkham games are masterpieces.
Yeah, these games are so special to me. You know, they came out around the time I was growing up, so I was thankfully exposed to them very early, and I have adored them ever since. They're so fun. And if you haven't touched an Arkham game, please do. You're doing yourself a favor.
The games just truly, like if you played the Spider-Man games, how they make you feel like Spider-Man, these games are the ones that started it because these games make you truly feel like you are the Batman. And it's just really a hard to replicate experience. And they're just such fun games. Go play them. Like you said, if you haven't played them, go home, go play. They're great.
You can find it used at any game store for something like $7, please.
Yeah, also that's another thing. Yeah, they're not like they're expensive games anymore, which is surprising. They're just easy, fun to play, cheap games.
That said, Batman Arkham Asylum has earned 1,555 points on our system and through our scale. Again, this score will make more sense as we review more games, but suffice it to say, despite how it's aged, this is a well-treasured game and has meant a lot of people. That said, we will now take a very small break to acknowledge Adam West for helping pull Batman into the public eye. And gentlemen, if you will join me.
Batman!
We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Bye.